Philip Kennedy Johnson and Marco Finnegan reveal the true threat to 007 as James uncovers just what his friend was investigating when she died. Philip Kennedy Johnson opens up his story arc and explains almost everything about Myrmidon this issue as Bond is set out on his mission. The overall plot of a secret cabal of mercenaries isn't really something new to Bond, thanks to things like Spectre and Smersh existing, but this organisation really reminded me of the Syndicate from the recent Mission Impossible films, especially with the plot point of an agent investigating their dealings and linking it all together while going undercover. Johnson also does a classic Bond trope this issue, with Bond kinda going rogue and refusing his orders, and the way he conveys it through Bond's emotions feels very much like how Timothy Dalton's Bond would have handled the situation, which is perfect for me since Dalton is my favourite Bond. Despite the first issue hinting that this would be a kind of a bit more realistic Craig-era Bond, I love the reveal that the bad guys all seemingly have body enhancements like cybernetics that let them have super strength and be able to kick and punch very hard, so I'm looking forward to Bond fighting more kind of cybernetic cyborg thugs in the coming issues. Marco Finnegan again does some really fantastic hard-hitting action sequences, using the page's space to its full advantage, while also making Bond's fight with an assassin in a cramped apartment hallway feel very open thanks to the blank, one-colour backgrounds that bring all the focus into the action and characters. The orange-red setting sun sort of colour palette that he was using for most of the issue was a great fit as well, since it's all based around a funeral of an agent and the end of an agent's life, you know, the sun setting sort of motif, and it was a really awesome way to further visualise the script's story in that regard. 007 Issue 2 broke open the plot and revealed the threat Bond must face, pulling from various sources in James Bond canon and even other spy thriller series like Mission Impossible to make for an exciting second issue. I'm going to give this issue an 8.5 out of 10. 007 Issue 2 finds Gwen given a proper state funeral as James remembers when they would train, and Gwen noticed how he doesn't seem to be the type to dwell on his own mortality. Bond doesn't understand what Gwen means, so Gwen reveals that Tanner told her that Bond went to have a look at the previous 007's personal effects. James says that he's working one of his old cases and he's reading through his predecessor's notes, and it's made him curious about who he was though, making him wonder if the previous 007 would have gone on his case had he known he would die, but he never knew the man so he can't really tell. Gwen knows that M doesn't bring people into the 00 office if they aren't up for it, and while she never knew the last 007 as well as some, she found him quite abrasive, but he was the best of the best and gave everything to become the best, and he deserves respect for giving his entire life and talent to the service. James meets with Moneypenny at the funeral, finding it good she came. Eve knows that Gwen was one of them after all, and M agrees, knowing that she was one of their best. Bond knows it's not like she was still in the game, leaving his friends concerned over what he said. Later on, James heads to a pub where he meets with other 00 agents, who order a special bottle of scotch and 6 glasses. 004 asks if James ever spoke with Gwen recently, and remembering not to say anything to anyone at MI6, James pretends he hasn't, and the others know that she deserved a hell of a lot better than what she got from MI6 and M, who aren't even investigating her mysterious death. As the drinks are poured, the agents share stories of how Gwen helped them out on tough missions, always managing to succeed, and how she made them want to live up to her. James's turn comes around and he decides to share one that Gwen wouldn't want him to share, remembering a time where they were chased down by a carload of thugs, and while he's known some of the bravest people in the world, Gwen showed grit that day that he'd never seen before, knowing the hard choices she made that day saved a lot of people who will never know the danger they were in. James knows the country won't ever know what they lost, and that's exactly how Gwen would want it. The agents all toast to 003 and James leaves the pub, finding M waiting for him outside. M knows that there is a lot Bond doesn't know, and James figures out that Gwen wasn't out of the game like she said. She was working solely for M. M figured that Gwen spoke to Bond given his attitude at her funeral, so James tells him about the note he found in her flat after he learned she died. He reveals the note told him about a defense contractor called Myrmidon and how she infiltrated them for M, learning that they have people in every intelligence agency in the world and resources answers that will change the whole game for everyone. She hopes that someone will come and try and recruit Bond into Myrmidon rather than try and kill him, and she has tried to convince the higher-ups to bring him in, but many still don't trust her, and they are now 2 weeks away from their biggest operation in London, and it's one James will want to be there for. James asks M about Myrmidon, learning how years ago a Russian dissident was assassinated on British soil, and Gwen investigated, found evidence that the hitman might have been former CIA. Gwen uncovered many similar incidents around the world in the following months and guessed a new player with deep pockets was recruiting high-level assets around the world, all to build a new intelligence agency, one free from allegiances to anyone. M reveals that Gwen struck up a rapport with 2 former Mossad agents, and that then Gwen and M orchestrated her ousting from MI6, and a few months later, she was recruited into Myrmidon, confirming everything Gwen had been investigating. Bond wants to know why more agents weren't brought in on this, but M knows that Gwen believed there is a mole inside MI6, and they couldn't trust anyone, not even Bond, since Myrmidon has now moved past low-level assassinations to full-scale military operations. But M and the others don't know enough and need to find out what their goals are, which Bond is to find out. James refuses to, remembering when Gwen told him years ago about how the job will just use him up and cast him out someday, and now she is dead for nothing, and Bond refuses to forgive that in a hurry. Bond heads home, but upon reaching his apartment, he finds someone has been inside his home. Before he can reach for his gun, an assassin catches him from behind, telling him to slowly toss the weapon and open the apartment so they can meet his friends. The assassin asks how he knew the apartment had been opened, thinking there was a hidden camera or a silent alarm, but Bond reveals it was a simple toothpick in the door jamb, and it was broken on the floor when he got back. The assassin finds it funny the spies always use these old-timey gimmicks as Bond unsheathes a knife from his sleeve, turning and stabbing the man in the chest, telling him sometimes the old ways are the best. The man barely flinches, smacking Bond on either side of the head and throwing him hard into the wall behind him, telling him the old ways don't cut it anymore. Bond comments about how strong the man is as the man comes at him with his knife, forcing Bond to try and disarm him. Bond tries to kick the man's knee out from under him, but doesn't feel his kneecap, but the man knows he's not as fragile as James, smashing up the concrete wall behind him with his bare hands as James dodges him. Bond thinks that he's had some work done, and the man knows that his best asset has been the one that he was born with. He cracks Bond in the chest with his knee, commenting on how he loves kicking the shit out of guys like Bond. James manages to grab the man's ankle-holstered gun, shooting him in the chest half a dozen times, telling him it's like what he said, find what you love and let it kill you. He tells the man that Gwen Gann sends her regards, as suddenly he's tasered from behind by Mr. Rook, who knows that they were sent to kill him and he had to go and open his mouth, so now they have to take him and find out how much Bond and his people know. Rook tells his boss that plans have changed as Brooks was killed and they are bringing Bond in, but 007 won't be a problem again after this.